Aloha. With this build, I wanted to go into the infrastructure of how this system presents itself as the savior, this sort of masculine supremacy program. You can compare that to the so-called white supremacy program. I'm going to give examples of this so you can understand like where I'm coming from and how it's basically the same story. It's the same agenda dressed in another style, and ultimately what's being played is your emotions. And this includes everything from mainstream religions to the public education system to NASA, the cosmology, the government conspiracy theories. It's basically ingrained in the way you perceive information. We get caught up in the information itself, but it's not so much about the information itself. It's about the way the information is presented to you. So like last night, for example, I just watched David Letterman's My Next Guest on Netflix. And I've been watching those because his first guest on that show was Barack Obama. And then I think he had after that was like George Clooney. And then I think last night, I might be missing one, but last night he had Malala on there. And you can tell the basic premise of mainstream entertainment relating to political matters is to take this information and present it to the masses, but in the way it's presented to you, like movies, in the way the movie plays itself, you're still going to be watching a movie. It's still going to be entertainment. But this is a different style of entertainment. These individuals like David Letterman and late night talk show hosts, they inherently desensitize you by the way that they are, by the very nature of their presentation. So, for example, when he was interviewing Malala last night, or when I saw it last night, her main thing is educating women around the world. And obviously, you can see how this connects to this fake feminism movement. But on a deeper level, you can see that ultimately the system only promotes people. It only shares information from individuals that believe in the system. When Malala's asking for education, she's asking for the same system that enslaved her, that added up to the ideologies that added up to her being shot and her being in the position to where women, and all people, but women specifically around the world, are treated as less than men. For one example, I mean, it's so much more than that, but you can see how there's a step down. Like, how far can you go? Like, how much change are we really asking for? So like, what was Black Lives Matter asking for? What are these feminists asking for? What were the people in the civil rights time frame? What were they asking for? Now, if you can see the difference between what Black Lives Matter represents and them being funded by George Soros, stand that up next to what Malcolm X was saying. Stand that up next to what the Black Panthers were actually doing in the community, being built up of 70% of women who are actually feeding these children and educating these children on issues that are on the macro scale. See, when Malala asks for education for women, she's coming from the perspective of like politicians. Politicians represent the system being fixable, as if it wasn't built to be destructive like this, as if this patriarchal program wasn't designed to have a particular effect on people. So what the system has to do is promote shallow perspectives that don't really allow people to go any further than what the system has allowed them to think about. Because if you go any further than that, you'll be a threat to the system. That is basically the intent, the purpose of the mainstream media. It's the purpose of the public education system. It's the purpose of so-called alternative news and the mainstream news and mainstream politics and so on and so forth. It's to make the shallow storylines so important through playing your emotional body, through playing your heartstrings, through making it real for you by, having your kid being sent overseas to go fight a war that shouldn't have existed in the first place, to go fight a war that was made up for power, control, greed, money. All of these designs are not a mistake. But since the masses are so caught up in the storyline that gets presented by the system, nothing really changes because we've given our power away. That's the main thing. We give our power away, our focus, our attention, our intelligence, our connections, our roots. Everything gets fabricated by this system. And it really is like a disease. And don't think I'm not talking about the so-called conspiracy theory groups, and specifically even the flat earth so-called community, because the same thing happened in the so-called flat earth community. Look at your so-called top brass. When they were presented with the lie of the universe, what were they telling you and still telling you? Oh, well, let's just make it go mainstream. Any advertisement is good advertisement, or any media is good media, and that whole thing. It's shallow. It's dealing with, it's dealing with the system as it's presented to us, as if that's the only thing that matters. When you understand that so-called flat earth, or the not globe earth, it's not so much about the physical nature of this universe. It's what comes from the lie that exists inside of you, the psychological warfare, and then up into the spiritual warfare. But since people are so used to, well, it's really complex, because a lot of people are used to this kind of approach, and on the other hand, you have other people who are just like, they're just doing it because they literally can't see further. The horizon is different. The horizon is only a few feet away, and that's okay. You're gonna have a lot of people who are gonna jump on that boat with that close horizon because it's easy. The closer your horizon, the easier it's gonna be. You don't have to. You can play in a kiddie pool all day, and most people are gonna play in a kiddie pool because most people have a lot of work to do and don't really want to go out into the deep ocean and start swimming where it's dangerous, because a lot of their lifestyles that have been based upon shallow seas and kiddie pools for so long, they will become vulnerable if they start going out into the deep ocean. Once you start going out, the further you keep going out, the further their horizon is going to go. That's no different than realizing that you're always going to be learning. You're always going to be educating yourself, and you're going to always be sailing towards that horizon. And the bigger your boat gets, in reference to your intelligence, your energy, your spiritual nature, your psychological nature, your physical nature, however you work those muscles, however you get into that groove, you will be setting yourself up for deeper challenges. That's just like dreams, like I've explained dreams in the last video. You start off by being scared by nightmares, but once you start facing these monsters in your dreams, the monsters take on a different effect. The dream lasts longer. You have more to experience within that dream. If you just run away from the monster, you're going to wake up. If you turn around and say, look, I know I'm in a dream. I know you're not a real monster. I know I'm the one that's creating this world right now. you've owned not only that experience, but you've owned the very world that that experience is taking place in. When you do that, you're expanding not only your world on the micro scale, but you're expanding your world on the macro scale, the subconscious plane that is the infrastructure, the coding of the world itself. So this is why the system creates these micro distractions, like a Donald Trump. He's a micro distraction. He represents a system that shouldn't exist in the first place. But since he's so lively, he's so and he's made every day to be seen as something to pay attention to. Like Barack Obama. They didn't have to do much with Barack Obama. They didn't have, look, the late night talk shows didn't even exist largely the way they did, the way they are now in reference to politics. Back when Barack Obama was in office. When he was in office, people were inherently dumbed down because most people trusted him. So people were dumbed down because their trust in him. He seemed intelligent. He seemed for the people. He seemed like he was going to make a change. People believed in him and this whole thing. Not to mention the fact that it was just like, oh, good, we can take a break because finally we got our first black president. So people can finally shut up about that whole thing and let's just get back to the whole white savior program next time. But right now, let's see what you guys do. So there's that perspective. And then there's this perspective in the so-called black community that's just like, yeah, we did it. Well, what did you do? Like the Black Panther movie. What did that do? It's a fairy tale. You have to find something deeper than just being black. First of all, that's made up. You have to find, and the same thing goes for people who are still benefiting from the white supremacy program, whether they realize it or not. You have to find something deeper than just being white. It's the same thing. Although the system itself is built around just as intricate and as deep as you can see people being mind controlled by the Black Panther movie, Hollywood in general, Black Lives Matter, all these things, just as much as you can see people being locked into that. Multiply that times 1,000,000 and you will find the actual equations for society itself in reference to the so-called white supremacy program. See, people don't want to do that math. They don't want to look in that story. A lot of people want to talk shit and make fun of the so-called black community because they're falling for this Hollywood fairy tale and this comic book as, you know, empowerment for who and what you are. First of all, you're not black. You're deeper than that. Something is at work here that's on a spiritual level that it's so vibrant that it's good enough. It's okay enough just to be whatever it is that you are. Just think about once that information tunes into the roots. Black at best is the bark on the tree. It's the branches. It's the bark on the branches of the tree. It's not even getting into the roots. It's just like a flower petal of the roots of that system. It represents something. It's like the introduction to the book that's going on. But since people have been locked into nothingness for so long, look at and a perfect example of this is the outlawing of slaves learning how to read. When you shrink somebody down so low to less than an animal, pretty much like 3/5 of a human being, the savior program, the savior government created a world that said, look, they're animals. These slaves, you can just hang them. Just drag them down the street, set them on fire, burn their churches, blow up their communities. If they try to get anywhere close to what we're doing in our world, you just blow it up. So why do you think all this stuff, what do you think is going to happen? When look at this. This same thing happened in Black Wall Street. Now look at what's happening right now, this so-called black renaissance in the entertainment industry. Right when the dollar is about to crash, right when they're about to tie in this whole cryptocurrency thing and start activating something else. You think, and the thing is, whatever it is that happens in this system, and people are thinking, oh yeah, this is what's going to happen when the stuff crashes as the so-called black community continues to raise itself within that slave program. People are going to say, oh, well, of course they would do that. Of course they would crash the dollar just to keep us from getting something, just to keep us from challenging their system. See, that's one way to see it. Another way to see it is to see that the system was designed this way. It's been going on like this. This is only the beginning. Once you're brought all the way to the top and then you're cut all the way down, you know how hard it is to get back up and do something? You'll be stronger if you do that, but that's a hell of a lot of work to be doing. This is why a lot of people don't really want to do that work. They usually stay in the kiddie pool where everybody else is. You can walk around in the ocean and think, oh yeah, like, or on the beach and be like, yeah, at least I'm in the ocean. At least I'm not, burning on the beach or, in at work or, doing some dumb shit or whatever I'm doing over there. At least I'm in the ocean of consciousness talking about what's going on. The thing is, there's no difference between being in the in the shallow kiddie pool and being on the beach. You're still not even actually reading the book of that ocean of consciousness. You're just convincing yourself. That's the gateway. It's the waiting room. And that's where these gatekeepers stay. They stay like when you go to a beach and they have that rope around the area where you're not supposed to go any further because it gets deep, or maybe they have nets out there because there's sharks out there, or whatever it is. They have a rope covering an area. Think of it like a resort area. They have a rope covering an area in a beach where the tourists are just supposed to play. You're a tourist. You're not actually a part of this system. You're a part of the system that has created boundaries for you, that has created your movements for you. What do you think this feminism movement is, and this Black Lives Matter movement is, and this LGBT and the alien agenda and the new age community and all the Bernie Sanders and the prepping with Donald Trump? What do you think that is? That's the kiddie pool. To be more visual with it, it's like that rope around the resort. The resort of today is Western civilization. And everybody that lives outside of the resort is demonized, and they will have their lands conquered and they will be destroyed in order to expand the resort. And since people have been living in the resort for so long, and they've been convinced generation upon generation for so long that this is the only way, in fact, scientifically, it's the evolutionary peak of the human experience. Nobody's going to challenge that. Very seldom people are going to step out into that and swim past that barrier, swim past that boundary and see what's in that ocean. Because first of all, before you even swim up to that barrier, you have to have first challenge yourself to defeat your fears to go there. See, internally it has to happen before you go there. But what happens in the kiddie pool or in the little resort area is that people are they have everything. They have their food, they have their water, because they work, so they get engaged. So they didn't get it from somebody. They worked for it. So they did it themselves. It's kind of like, letting a little kid like win at something. It's like they gotta feel something. They gotta, when you're playing basketball or something, like you let them do it. That's what the system is doing. You can't just, you make it kind of challenging. That's the thing. Politics, Donald Trump, the alternative or aggressive progressive news, conspiracy theories, Alex Jones, these are all good examples of this fake challenge. Like, oh, good jobs. Just put some alien videos out there. Let Alex Jones talk about interdimensional pedophiles who are working in the church and working in the government, and make him look so crazy that anything that he's talking about will just immediately be discredited, because that it's just so out of the ordinary, and it comes from this this ridiculous resource that most people are just going to push it to the side or put it on a shelf and never think about it again. Then you have the people, then at the same time you have the system promoting the storyline that will maintain the storylines of tomorrow, 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And as the consciousness changes between that 5, 10, and 15 years, those storylines will also evolve based upon the consciousness of that moment and the consciousness that they perceive to be 5, 10, and 15 years down the road. So Netflix is another one of these. I did a video on this like 3 years ago or something like that, talking about how Netflix is designed. Back when Netflix was basically, it didn't really have that much on there. Now it's got all kinds of documentaries and interviews and the Black Mirror and these TV shows and comedy shows, all this stuff. This is another version of the mainstream media. Point being is that Netflix it's not like cable or the local news. It's you choose what to watch. You have the illusion of choice though, because you're only choosing what to watch based upon what they make available for you. It's another resort. You can't go past those boundaries. If you go past those boundaries, it's too much. And most of the time, people only have so much time. So like with work and everything, but with the internet is a good example. In social media, you have access to more information. But like back in the day, the newspaper was the truth. And then the radio, whatever came on the radio, that was the truth. And then whatever came on the local news, that was the truth. These were all truth. I'm saying truth in a sense that a truth so deeply rooted in your reality based upon these forefathers in this resort setting up your truth for you. Truth down to the soul. Here's the proof of that truth to your soul. The truth that came from the newspaper sent hundreds of thousands of kids to war. The truth that came from the radio sent hundreds of thousands of kids to war. These are souls that were sent to war. Those souls were sold to an illusion based upon death and destruction for power, control, and greed. The newspaper could do it. The radio did it. The little 3 or 4 channels that you had on your first television, that did it. Then it went to cable. Then it went to the internet. And now social media. And now it's evolving into Netflix. So now you can see how this resort is expanding or having the illusion of expansion, but it really represents the same mentality, the same lies, the same sentiment that was sold to you back when the newspaper was the only form of education or information. Same with the radio and all that other stuff. The same algorithms that were designed back then are still existing today. They just call them Netflix or social media, or you're following these actors, or late night talk shows, or Amazon Prime and all this other stuff. You have the illusion of choice in this synthetic version of consciousness. And the way it's designed, the way people are locked into believing the people that also believe in the system. Like David Letterman, like he's got like a charismatic comedy to him. Like he's believable. He's an older guy. He's been in the game for a long time. He doesn't seem threatening at all. He's very confident. He's in like circles with Barack Obama and everybody that's been on television and in politics for the last like 30 years or something like that. Like he's been around, like, so these people are trustworthy, like the same kind of trust. David Letterman represents the same kind of trust that Barack Obama represented. It's an overall trust in the system. And then there's this, he covers it up with this like this comedic arrogance, to where he's kind of like, he was saying something on the show like last night, like, yeah, I like the UK, but they drive on the wrong side of the road and they sit on the wrong side of the car. You can see, I mean, obviously it's based upon comedy, but you can see he's not lying in a sense that people think like that. We drive on the right side of the road. We sit on the left side of the car. We on the right side of the car. We sit on the right side. We drive on the right side, and everybody else is wrong. It's kind of like the metric system too. Like we use feet and inches while everybody else is using meters and all this other stuff. So we're right and everybody else is wrong. That's the essence of just arrogant ignorance, that misogynistic sort of mentality. Now, people who are just like, oh yeah, David Letterman is, no, I know that, but I'm talking about, he represents an intern, like a subconscious mentality that goes all the way up to the military industrial complex. It's like those people are living primitively and savagely. We need to go spread some America over there. We need to give them some freedom. They're driving on the wrong side of the road. They need to be bombed so they can finally drive on the right side of the road. Well, who the hell gave you the authority to make that decision? Who? They did. The system itself. So this goes back to the system not being broken. It was built this way. There's nothing broken about this system. This system is a fully functioning organism that is running exactly the way it needs to be. The system runs off chaos. It's its fuel. So anything that promotes chaos is a benefit to the system. So anything that keeps people from realizing the chaos that's in the macro scale and the micro scale that exists inside of people, anything that keeps people from realizing that exists is also a benefit to the system. So this is why Alex Jones is a benefit to the system. They need him to create more chaos. They need people like David Letterman, George Clooney, Malala, and Barack Obama to play the role of believers in this system, because you have the extremes of Alex Jones and information out there that's telling you that the entire system is rotten. But when you have somebody so charismatic like Obama, and their comedy is just watering it down, the fire of the masses is being watered down by these comedic algorithms, these illusionists. Whether they know it or not, they're playing the game that is enslaving everybody. So, like I said, here are some examples of, or I'm going to go over some examples of how, like, the level of consciousness, the system adjusts around the level of consciousness, the focus of the people. So you have, like back in the day, you had the Civil Rights Act that was designed to be a pressure relief valve for people who are addressing the white supremacy program. The system itself, they weren't talking about equal rights and civil rights. They were talking about inhumane injustices against nature, against humanity. Injustices against nature and humanity. But in order to keep people, to keep the status quo, to keep people from realizing the depths of the program, the pressure relief valve was a civil rights act. Other pressure relief valves are going to war. It's like, oh, at least something is happening, and we know the good guy is always going to win. And in this system, the good guy always wins because the good guy is also the bad guy, and the good so-called good guy is playing both sides of the war. That's why the good guy always wins. And just like I said in that last short video about the relationship between Hollywood and the public education system, the same thing goes for the relationship between people who are promoting war and people who are supposedly against this war, these wars in this system. It's the same story. Some people know. Some groups are very aware of it, and they get paid to maintain that back and forth. Like Democrats and Republicans. You think the Democrats are the superhero because the cool people in Hollywood and on television and politics, those are the cool people. That's the cool crowd. While you have the old, racist, decrepit old white man and still in the White House, still holding on to those racist values. You think like, oh yeah, this is real, something really going on. And then you got like younger people like Alex Jones, joining teams with an individual like Donald Trump. It makes it more real. And then you get the TYT, even younger people making you think it's even more real. So when will it stop? Like when will the information be seen for what it is? It's not so much about the micro scale of what's being said, it's how what's being said is being said. So ultimately, like I said, nothing changes. The system is designed to present itself like that in order to have the illusion of change, control this opposition, and then ultimately water it all down. So this Western world is the controlled opposition. The design is to entertain, turn the problems into entertainment, and then just move on to the next story. Once you turn these huge issues, like once you shrink down the war against the feminine energy, also when you're in a patriarchal program, there's also a war against the masculine energy. But the mainstream storyline that's being promoted in order to make a savior, a superhero out of itself, is the war against women, which is totally true because this is a patriarchal program. And since the system knows that, and since the system knows that the consciousness of the people knows that, it's going to use that as fuel to make people think that things are changing. This is why you have Black Lives Matter, which was the pressure relief valve for people being shot on the street from these KKK cops that are just no longer wearing robes. They're wearing guns and suits and ties and uniforms and running around locking people up and getting paid for it. And they're doing the most criminal shit out there. But you can't talk about that. Just like you can't talk about Pizzagate and the pedophilia that's in the churches, and the pedophilia that's in the politics and the governments, and the pedophilia that's in the Hollywood. You can't talk about that stuff. See, that's the information that goes into the infrastructure of the macro storyline that's going on. So you have all these people that are talking about politics and this and that. They're still in the micro scale, personalizing this shit. This shit ain't new. This shit is older than old. And the same thing, and since you're always going to be limited to the consciousness of the people, the same thing happened when Flat Earth popped off. Flat Earth it was, and this is another reason why I speak in reference to Flat Earth, because it inherently goes to the roots. You're talking about Earth instead of focusing on the flat. Why aren't we talking about Earth? And the relation, because if you start talking about Earth, then you start talking about humanity, then you start talking about mind control. But if you just focus on the flat versus the globe, you can constantly avoid that. If you start talking about Earth, you're going into the oceans of the macro storylines. But what happened was Flat Earth created another resort with another barrier to make another kiddie pool called Flat versus Globe, where everybody can just swim around in this new resort. Oh, it's so wonderful here. We can hang out, we can party, we can talk about stuff in our little resort area. And other people, the only other people that can come into this resort is if they find it on their own, like a little secret island. Oh, look at this. This is so wonderful on our secret island. You created another resort for yourself, another comfort zone. But see, that's not based upon largely. See, you're going to have the controlled opposition that wants that to happen. On the other hand, you're going to have the internal, the subconscious controlled opposition that exists inside people on the micro scale, that they can't help it. They might have the best intentions in the world, but if you don't do the actual work to realize the deeper oceans of these storylines, you're only going to be comfortable in a resort area. This is a large part of the reason why I talk about the human story and like, where's your power at? Is your power in Flat versus Globe? An example of why that is not your power source is because the system can co-opt your little Flat versus Globe in a nanosecond. And now you have nothing. So you have no weapons. You have no, you're what you thought were weapons against this system or whatever. They're not yours. They were given to you by the system. You can say, oh, well, I found flat earth on my own. I did this. You can say, you can convince yourself of anything you want. But as long as you still are trapped in the microcosm and avoiding consciously or subconsciously the macrocosm, you're going to be playing a game. It doesn't matter if it's dressed in a flat earth suit or a conspiracy theory suit or a 9/11 suit or a planes fly on compressed air suit. This is just another piece on the board. And if you're not realizing how the game is being played because you're so distracted by the pieces on the board, nothing's going to actually happen. We already know Tesla's shit was already taken and co-opted. And what did they do? They took that free energy, put it in a closet somewhere, and sold you Edison with his DC electricity because they can easily make a profit off of that. Can't make a profit off of free energy. Everything else stems from that. You want to go into the information that people are talking about, and thank you to the people who did bring up. I haven't looked deeply into the planes running off compressed air stuff, mostly because, like I said, it's just another piece on the board. And if you're not looking at the way the system is designed, you're going to be playing a game thinking, oh yeah, this is it. But nothing's actually going to change. You're trapped in another bubble, another bubble of truth, another microcosm, thinking that nothing in the microcosm will ever amount to being able to address the macrocosm. Everything within the microcosm, all of the bubbles in the microcosm make up the macrocosm. If you put all of your eggs in the basket of the microcosm, you're done. You're done. Because like I said, it can easily be co-opted, and then now what? You're done. So this is why the system utilizes groups run by George Soros, and it actually makes a profit off of distractions. Like Alex Jones is a good example of a giant microcosm. He's a microcosm. InfoWars is a microcosm in itself. It's like one of the biggest microcosms that is supposed to mirror the macrocosm. He presents an argument that says all these people are aliens and this is just horrible. Look what they do. They're turning the frogs gay. They're chemtrails in the sky. They're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this, they're doing that. And you see all these bubbles and you're bombarded by all these microcosms. And since you have all this information and he's got this team of people who have actually gone through this information, you think that that is the macrocosm because he's actually teamed up with the so-called leader of the free world. He's an artificial macrocosm, just like the mainstream media and this so-called aggressive progressives and all this other shit. It's an artificial macrocosm. Flat Earth, the commercial version, this fake ass top brass, let's just get Flat Earth to go mainstream. That's another artificial macrocosm. And since it's got the word Earth in the title, people think, just like Alex Jones, since it's got info wars, it's the information. It's like the Earth and Flat Earth. You're talking about the Earth and the Earth's people. No, the only way you can talk about Earth's people and humanity is if you talk about that story. You can't just reference it. But see, people use that, say, oh yeah, we're using it, like Alex Jones uses conspiracy theories to sell a particular agenda. It's still a microcosm. The little flat Earth community, flat versus globe. Ooh, I'm gonna punch you in the face. Oh, globe versus flat. We won. We knocked you out. It's bullshit. For what? What's your end game? When they start talking about flat Earth, you think they're gonna do anything? No. It's gonna be just another civil rights act, another Black Lives Matter, another fake feminism movement, and so on and so forth. So what Flat Earth does is it's entertainment now. This so-called Flat Earth community, just like I said in reference to David Letterman and even these movies like the Black Panther movie. When the Black Panther movie, Killmonger, referencing colonialism. They turned colonialism and everything, and they turned it into an entertainment, a movie. So people don't actually, the people who are deepest into that resort complex, they're not going to do anything because they're going to allow the system to think, they think the system is going to do something about it in the near future because it was mentioned in the Black Panther movie, or we had our first black president, or Black Lives Matter is out there, the Occupy movement is out there, or whatever is going on. People vest their energy in, when you're so locked into the microcosms of illusions, you actually give your work, you give your focus, your information, your intelligence, you give it away to a system. So people, because that's the comfort zone. Same thing happens in the flat earth community. People are largely, a lot of people are just waiting around, just kind of like, oh yeah, what's going to come of this? All I need to do is just be a part of this community or be a part of this information. A lot of the times people don't have the time or the energy to actually do anything because we're so bombarded by, our jobs, our work, our families and stuff like that. So it's not to come down on people. I'm just giving examples of how this system is designed. So if you take it personally, that's your problem. That ain't my problem. I'm just speaking generally in reference to how this system is designed to attack our subconscious, and we don't even realize it because we think it's normal. And we lock ourselves into these microcosms without even knowing it. So flat earth, it turns this entertainment into, it turns the concept of the macro scale into entertainment. This is the deepest lies. It's like a doorway to the deepest lies told to humanity, but it doesn't do anything. There's nothing comes of it. It'll all just be the same people who lied to you in the first place. If you give it all away, it's like thinking that the system is broken and that you can just, it'll just be fixed once flat earth goes mainstream. No. You're swinging your sword at ghosts, at illusions. It's like looking at the image on the wall that's projected by the projector and shooting a gun at the wall, at the projection screen, thinking something's going to change. but you're never getting into the storyline that is being pumped through the projector and the projector itself and the information or the entities that created that illusion that makes you stab the wall, stab the hologram. So, like I said, the system promotes and advertises people who believe in the system, like Malala and Letterman, and the whole thing about that was this whole, she's doing like she's Oxford educated. She's doing tours for new kids or new women that are going to Oxford, and she's deeply believing in the system, no different than a politician. Even though she says she's not a politician, she doesn't want to be a politician, she actually is playing the same role as a politician, but instead of engaging in the politics of society, she's engaging in a microcosm, which is of that same macrocosm, which is the education within that politics of society. So it's not any kind of change that will be a threat to the system. It's actually a change that will be a benefit to the system. So it's no mistake that it's no just coincidence that, David Letterman is playing the Malala card on Netflix for everybody to see. At the same time, Oprah popped off at the Golden Globes. At the same time, a Wrinkle in Time is being played. At the same time, all this Time's Up and Never Again and Harry Weinstein stuff is going on. It's not a coincidence. You think it's a coincidence? You're still trapped in a little bubble. So, trying to see what's going on. The change and the huge problems are seen as entertainment. It's desensitized. So that's the ultimate design of this system, is to desensitize you. When you see the deepest, darkest problems that are out there, this is kind of why I had like my own feelings about this top brass, like very deeply. I was in that whole space of, man, this is some bullshit. If they're just literally telling you, don't take away from the flat earth message by talking about humanity and all that other stuff. We want to focus on, you don't want to scare people away with all that information. It's like, man, shut up with that nonsense. What are you talking about? When they go to those extremes to actually try to say like, oh yeah, you're revealing too much information. That's ultimately what Mark and Patricia were saying when they actually verbalized, don't take away from the message of flat earth. They're literally saying, don't share too much information because, and giving them the ultimate benefit of the doubt, they're saying that because you don't want to scare people away from flat earth. Are you serious? You're going to play that game. You're going to sacrifice the information about the infrastructure of the system that you're talking about. You're going to sacrifice that so you can play the little game of the hologram that's being projected on the wall. Why? On the deepest bullshit, most bullshit why that's out there is because some of them want to be a part of that Malala, David Letterman, Barack Obama sort of flat earth change. They want to be a part of that story. Like I said, when flat earth goes mainstream, who do you think they're going to talk to? They're not going to talk to the people who are talking about humanity and the depths of the lie itself. They're going to talk to the people who want to play the game of it's just flat versus globe. And you guys just need to stop lying to us. And they'll get what they're asked for. They're going to get it and they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry. We're not the ones who lied to you. It was those people who lied to you. And then people are going to start giving a round of applause and saying, we did it, and coming together and all this other stuff. And what did you do? Nothing. Nothing actually changed because you got caught up in the entertainment side of it. So you can see this as, like I said, ultimately what happens is that people get desensitized. So when you're so locked into the flat versus globe, you actually, over time, you get desensitized from the human story. And this is a proof of that when in my videos, and this goes back 2-3 years ago when I started making these videos, specifically in related to flat earth, when I was speaking in reference to the human story as being the front line of this flat earth storyline, I was being attacked by people in the comment section, in emails and all kinds of stuff, by people who were high. They were high as shit off of that flat earth community. When it was brand new, oh man, you could not say one thing against those flat earth top brass holes up there. You couldn't say one thing about them. They were untouchable. You said anything about Mark and Patricia, you were an automatically enemy. You were a shill. You were this. You were that. But 3 years later, tides have changed. Now that fake ass shit is more obvious than anything, and you can see it. That's a proof of that. A proof of that, like what I was saying about today. It's a challenge. You're challenging them. And then back in the day, it wasn't like I was a. They didn't see it as like, oh yeah, this is part of the bigger story. He's talking about this. No, you were literally like, I was literally put in a box, and it's ridiculous. It's not even worth talking about, because ultimately what it boils down to is that you were threatening their flat earth Netflix show. It was entertaining. So if you're not talking about the entertainment show that was and still is flat earth, then something's wrong with you. It's like, no, I just don't live in your little funky ass resort. I'm not swimming around in your little polluted ass beach thinking that you're swimming in the ocean. Kiss my ass with that. But back in the day, that resort was huge. Flat earth felt like the ocean. The flat earth community felt like the ocean because there was nothing else. People were still on the beach. You didn't even know the water existed. But as soon as flat earth came into the picture, people put their little toe in the water and then put their foot in and then started swimming around, jumping around in the ocean, bringing beach toys and playing football and barbecuing on the flat earth community beach resort. Everybody's having a good old time, meeting up and all this other stuff. It's wonderful. You say a damn thing about anything that exists outside of that resort, and something's wrong with you. No, I'm not falling for that entertainment bullshit anymore. It's the name of the game. Look at your so-called leader of the free world. He is an entertainer. He represents entertainment. This dude literally was messing around with the World Wrestling Federation, the most fakest shit that's out there. He's the leader out there. And it's so complex, it's not limited just to distraction. Like I said, one of the biggest things that happens is that you get desensitized, because these people that you trust, they amplify the information. So, yeah. These are a list of some of the people who represent that shallow mainstream resort mentality through the David Letterman Netflix thing. And like I said, it's on Netflix, so they want you to watch it. They want you to be involved in that. It's basically nothing. Netflix is. So if it's available and you got people like Barack Obama, Malala, Jay-Z, George Clooney, and George Clooney's wife. It's not mostly about George Clooney. It's mostly about, they got him on there because of what his wife is doing, all that humanitarian work that she's doing. That's why he's on there. So these are macro scale in that illusory storyline. They're macro scale representatives in the micro bubble that is this mind control program. So Jay-Z's on there too. He's coming up next after Malala. And then his powerhouse behind him is Beyonce. So, and then he's tied in, Jay-Z and Beyonce's tied in directly to Barack Obama. So it's this whole network of people, just like a little community of people that you believe simply because of the network that they're a part of. So you have these professional, what happens is ultimately in this macro scale, you have these professional askers for change. You get these highlighted people They get these askers asking the people that are thinking that the system is just broken and that it just needs to be changed because it's still built up of these good things, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's built up of this good stuff. Where are you starting from? Make America Great Again? Good where? Go back to the beginning. What beginning are you talking about? Everything on Netflix, everything on the mainstream media, everything that is there is talking about a root system that is avoiding the origins of the new world. It's avoiding the indigenous genocide, not only in the United States, but across the earth. It's avoiding colonialism and the inhumanity that's in that system. It's avoiding white supremacy. It's avoiding the illusions of heliocentrism. It's avoiding the prison industrial complex. It's avoiding the military industrial complex, because all of these systems are profitable to the macro system, the macro system within the micro system of your world. So they just have to promote more people, like I said, in reference to the relationship between Hollywood and the education system. They have to promote more people who believe in the system so you can relate to them. And the way they do that, they play your emotional heartstrings by getting these people to like Malala to tell their story. And then they don't give a shit about education. David Letterman actually, and you can see it from the interview itself. Look at the weight that David Letterman has. Look at the people that he's talking to, Barack Obama and Jay-Z and all these. Look at all that just from a monetary stance. And look at all the reach. Like what they could actually do if they really did give a shit. But they don't. So it's just entertainment. And the way that the information gets washed out is by dressing it up in a fancy interview and giving these individuals like Malala a platform to speak about education within the system. And yes, her intentions. See, what happens is that the system becomes credible because they advertise people who are actually human. They're actually their intentions are real. They really care. And a lot of the times people really care to a certain degree because they're not really privy to other informations. They get caught up in one bubble. So a perfect example of that is like Malala, who her main thing is education. Is something wrong with that? Of course not. Of course not. Of course people should be educated, but is that the depths of the reasons why and how the system came to be? No. It's still asking the system for some kind of change. So like I said, that's what Malala represents. And politicians and people like Cenk Uygur on TYT and even Alex Jones. These are professional askers for change, and they will continue to be highlighted, while people who actually speak on the ideological change, the infrastructure itself, what led up to the system, they will either be taken out or ignored. They will be taken out or ignored, and they will be demonized in the long run. This is why the Native Americans, the indigenous people across the earth, were called primitives and savages, because their spiritual connections to the earth itself and each other was an inherent threat to the synthetic system that they needed to make a profit off of. They needed to build themselves up. So they were demonized, they were ignored, and they were taken out. That's still happening today. And who's being promoted? These fake ass politicians and these shallow storylines that only promote the nature of the resort, the beach program, jumping around in the sand and playing volleyball with beach balls, just kicking beach balls around, thinking that, something is happening. So this is once you have taken out the people who are threatening the system, once you have constantly ignored and demonized those people, now all you have to do is amplify the fear program. So that's why you have these false flags. That's why the military industrial complex with all this war, and inherently, in reference to the Malala interview, another part of that, it's not just her amplifying your asking for education from this system under the guise of, like women's rights and all this other stuff. But another thing is that what happened to her personal story is that she was actually shot in the head by a so-called Taliban. So what that also does is it makes the whole Taliban story realistic for you. So just like Malala is talking about the education for women in reference to like, oh, it's needed, but not really going into the ideology of the system itself. Like overall, it's not just about that. There's a reason why. Same thing goes for the Taliban. Yes, it's nice that she's talking about the fact that she was attacked by these terrorists, so-called terrorists and all this other stuff. But the bigger storyline behind that is that she's not going to go into, or they're not going to allow her to go into the storyline of the United States, the so-called powers that be, being behind the birthing of the Taliban, the birthing of Al Qaeda, the birthing of ISIS, the birthing of all this stuff. Literally being behind, like the 9/11, all that storyline, everything. She's not gonna go. If she were to ever go into that storyline, they would not have a camera anywhere near her ass. They wouldn't have a microphone anywhere near her. But since she's just she's just telling her story, and her story benefits the system, she'll be promoted, she'll be put out there. And she not only benefits the system by her believing in the system and making other people believe in the system, but she also benefits the mind control programs of stuff like the war on terrorism, the Taliban, and so on and so forth. So it's a double whammy, at least, when you have somebody like that. Triple, really, when you talk about the reality that, this stuff really happened to her. And she, against all odds, she came back and she's still standing strong. Like that's like an American storyline now. That's like the main thing that America loves, that shit, or the United States loves that shit. So they're just gonna continue doing that. So this is emotional entertainment. And like I said earlier, the arrogance in David Letterman of a joke of driving on the wrong side of the road. It's a savior program. It's like, you're wrong. If you're wrong, that means we're right. You don't have to prove why or how right you are, or why you don't have to prove that. The only thing you have to do is extra prove how wrong somebody is. So this is what's happening in reference to the globe versus flat, and so on and so forth. They don't have to prove anything of how they are. They just have to say that you're wrong, you're dumb, you're uneducated, you're this, you're that. That's the main thing Neil deGrasse Tyson says. It's like, oh, a failure of our public education system, and such and such and such. That's his main thing. It's ridiculous, but that's his game. That's what he plays. He's out there to play that arrogant, egotistical, super brain. That's it. And since you don't have the mental capacity at all to even entertain the titles of these books that he's been, studying for his entire life, then you're just a little peasant who doesn't mean shit. You're not worth a damn. You're not worth the time of the day. You just have to follow the savior program. So he plays that patriarchal asshole and the savior, but his superpower is so-called the intelligence or the information of the universe. So he's another version of this savior program. So both men and women in this savior program who grow up in the patriarchal system will be broken in some way. When it's not just women, like I was talking about in reference to Malala, that everybody is built up of the positive and the negative energies, the masculine and the feminine energies. When you have an entire society that's based upon one-sidedness, you're going to break everybody that is built up of balance of the feminine and the masculine. So the qualities of art versus the qualities of science, the qualities of curves versus the qualities of lines, the qualities of magnetism versus the qualities of electricity, the qualities of the yin versus the yang. It's not a one versus the other or that versus this. It's all one big storyline that nature has created, that the indigenous people were talking about, that I was saying earlier, that is inherently the threat to the system. But the people have been compartmentalized by just being so caught up in the physical nature of this reality, saying, oh, that's a woman. Only thing you need to do is just, look like that, act like that, talk like that. And this is a man. Look like that. Be strong. Be a man. Like, be a part of this system. Do all this. That's what a man and a woman is. That's the most basic. It's not even a basic part of it. It's literally an illusion. It's an illusion. The qualities of the divine feminine and the qualities of the divine masculine are so much deeper than that. And the reasons why we are existing in here are so much in this dualistic storyline are so much deeper than this feminism movement and all this other shit. And this is what it all boils down to is, like I was saying, is that chaos. You have the positive and the negative. Another example of this positive and negative and the chaos in the middle is the LGBT movement and the alien movement, the alien new age agenda. See, all these new age alien lovers, these star seeds, they're that whole gender neutral shit. See, on the political scene, they have the LGBTQ stuff that's going on. That's that gender neutral shit that's going on. And then you have in the new age community, they're gender neutral because aliens are gender neutral, and the aliens are our future selves in the Pleiadian star system. So stop talking about, all this man versus stop keeping women down. We're all just one humanity. That it's ridiculous. But you can see that's another control version of compartmentalizing your systems. So the system who created the problems, they present itself as the savior for the broken people, keeping them at the top of that pyramid. So once you have broken everybody down, you have put out there the guidelines of what is left, what is right, what is positive, what is negative. You put those extremes out of the reach of people, and then you have everybody existing in the middle of the bubble, which is the chaos of nothingness, the chaos of not really having any kind of real convictions, not having any real truth, never getting into the structures. So what happens is the system tells everybody, climb this tree. You go off on the left side, you go off on the right side, and then you guys just play around in that tree like some monkeys in a tree, thinking that you're doing something. And then they cut the tree down and everybody's in chaos. This is what the, crashing of the dollar is going to be. This is what Donald Trump represents. This is what the crashing of the heliocentric program is going to be. Once they get everybody, and see, you need to be knowledgeable in some kind of way. You have to have some kind of knowledge to actually climb that tree and actually be in that tree and do something with the fruits in that tree. But like I said, if you don't become the root structure and the tree itself, you will be subjected to whatever the system promotes for you when they cut that tree down. So this is, like I said, the chaos is like the broken people. Broken people are on purpose. Look at your inner cities, the gangs, the guns, the drugs. You think that's a coincidence? You think it's a coincidence that there's a war on so-called, for example, I mean, it's all over the place, but a good example is a war on the family, particularly the so-called black family. There's a war. You have the single mother program that's out there. They're destroying the locking up of the melanated man. Look at your numbers in the prison education system. Of course, everybody else is enslaved and locked up in their own way. But if you want actual solid proof of a war against the indigenous people of this earth, go to the fucking prisons and go look at the prisons, and don't give me this shit about we're all slaves. Kiss my ass. Yes, in many ways that's true. But go look at the actual people who are enslaved right now in those cells. Go look at that right now. And see if you can tell me that same storyline as if it's not an actual attack on particular people. That attack needs to be. Look at how many people are locked up just in this nation, in reference to a quarter of the people who are locked up across the world are just from this nation. And what do they look like? You can't tell me that's not directly related to the war on the indigenous people that happened when Christopher Columbus came here and they started this New World mind control program bullshit. So take your new age, we're all one. It's not a war against any particular people. Take all that shit and shove it up your ass. I ain't got time for that. You're ignorant. You ignoring that storyline is the reason why, one of the biggest reasons why things are not changing. And all these distractions, including the so-called flat earth community, who continues to avoid the human story. Day after day, these big ass so-called flat earth channels, day after day, playing the same record over and over and over again of avoiding. It's not see, what happens is you started off playing new music when flat earth popped off. That's great. Oh, it was wonderful. Pop flat earth. Ooh, man, that shit had a good tune to it. 3 years later, you still playing that same music? You're not playing that music to entertain people after a certain amount of time. You are now playing that music to distract people from the deeper oceans of music that they could be playing, to keep people in that resort consciousness. It's bullshit. And once you get to that space, people been talking about this longer than me. I've been speaking this for 3 years. People that are consciously doing that. You are not only, whether they're consciously or unconsciously doing it, is of no never mind to me, because it has the same effect. What I'm saying is that I'm not invisible. I'm not the only one talking about this information. It's a lot of people saying this stuff, especially nowadays. So you are every single day consciously avoiding the root structure program. For what? There's a whole bunch of different reasons why. But the main reason is to keep people in their own bubble, because if you pop your bubble, you're vulnerable and you have to change. But you can't point the finger anymore when you got all this shit that you need to be changing and talking about and all this other stuff. You can't do that anymore. You can do it when you're in a bubble. You can do it when you're strapped in that place, but not when you're swimming in the ocean. Some damn sharks out there. You can still drown in a kiddie pool. But the chances of drowning when you're swimming out there past the borders in that big ass ocean they skyrocket. And it's people scared of that ocean. So overall, YouTube is desensitizing people with all the information under the guise of informing people. enlightening people. When you look at the macro scale, it's actually desensitizing people because it's promoting this helplessness. You have all this information. You find all this shit that's going on. You thought it was just 9/11. No, like I did too. I thought it was just, I was out there protesting. I had a, megaphone. I was out there, yelling at the banks, literally yelling at the banks, talking to people and all this other stuff. I was doing all that. But ultimately, that action was desensitizing me from the spiritual warfare. As deeply as I was into the psychological warfare and knowledgeable of that, the deeper I went into that bubble, the more it kept me from realizing the depths of the spiritual warfare. Same thing is happening with flat earth. Flat versus globe, at best, you're talking about an intellectual warfare. You're not going to allow yourself to go into the spiritual warfare until you break that bubble and incorporate it into the spiritual warfare. That's when you start getting into the root structure, the infrastructure of what's going on. So as people are being desensitized, you have also people that are being locked into this supervillain. So you have the supervillain program of Donald Trump. So having the supervillain of Donald Trump actually makes it easier to create superheroes out of any and everybody. Anything can become a superhero when you have a supervillain by the name of Donald Trump. That's what he represents overall. He's out there to make to bring to the surface how far people are, and how, in order for you to pride yourself in not being like those kind of people. So that's another version, another way that traps you into the micro bubbles that keep you away from the macrocosm, because you pride yourself. You're amplifying your ego. You're amplifying your representation of yourself based upon an illusion. But you're not actually doing any work. It's not any real change. It's the illusion of change. See, what happens when you put somebody like Donald Trump in the position of power is that it empowers everybody else, because now people feel smarter. They feel more entitled. They have this sense of pride. They have this sense of community. They have this sense of strength, not from having any qualities that are deeply rooted in the essence of who and what they are. It's only an illusion based upon what they are not. So when you have somebody so shitty like Donald Trump, you don't actually have to be or do anything. You just have to pride yourself in not being something. That's the card that's being played with Donald Trump. And it's just being amplified by these late night talk shows. And they just say, oh yeah, every day they're saying how great we are, not because we're great, but because we're not like a piece of shit. And people eat it up, and then they just go back to work and nothing actually changes. So what's happening is that people are building themselves up as the superhero, not because they have any superhero qualities. And the superhero qualities that are being pumped out in order to make you be feeling like you are a superhero is stuff like Black Lives Matter, is the Oprah Golden Globes speech and her tying her into Rosa Parks with that Cecil B award. I didn't even realize that till recently. Like that was the award that was given to Rosa Parks. The award that they gave to Rosa Parks was the award that they gave to Oprah. And it has the same effect. Like this is another reason, another way people are locked into like, believing something is real, because they just use people. They just use it, and then you don't have to actually be anything. You're just tied to something that's real, but you don't have to actually be about anything. You just have to be promoted as such. So everybody is being locked into this version of superhero qualities through these illusions, like the fake feminism movement, the LGBTQ, the first black president, the Black Panther movie, these first black directors at the top of the Hollywood box office, as if it matters at all. And then all this just fakeness, all this fake, it's just a synthetic version of progress. Synthetic progress being promoted as, real. And people are eating it up because there's obviously anti-progress with Donald Trump. When he got promoted, he represented anti-progress, especially after your so-called first black president. It made it even more realistic. Same thing goes for your first black president after the anti-progress program, which was George W. Bush and the war on terrorism. It's like, shit is so bad that we have to do something about it. And it's just entertaining. George Bush was entertaining. War has been desensitized so much that it's become entertainment. This is what the mainstream media does. So you have all these other storylines like the planes, like the truther community. Every single story within the truther community is, if you don't activate it to the macro scale of the roots of this program, it's just going to be another distraction. It's another version of making a superhero out of yourself. You make a superhero out of yourself because you have the lies of, planes flying on jet fuel. So you find information about planes flying off of actually compressed air. And now you've just discovered something. Now you're the superhero against the supervillains who've been lying for all this profit. And so no different than 9/11 and what Alex Jones actually does. He made a superhero out of himself by making the supervillain even more vibrant. But they needed him to do that because they needed him to make people pay attention to what he was talking about in order to make the bigger moves of like a new world agenda shift. You wouldn't be able to institute a new world agenda if people were not knowledgeable about this new world information that's happening on the counterproductive scale. You wouldn't be able to make a superhero on a new world scale if you at first didn't have the supervillain out there to have a reason why you need a new world change. The same thing happened back when Christopher Columbus came over here. He said, look, they're primitive, they're savage, they need the new world. You need to make them villainous. You need to call them primitive, call them savage, call them less than human. Not only to bring them down, but to bring you and your system up. It's the same game on a different day. That's a good example of the macro scale of how this system works. Well, we don't pay attention to it because we're so bombarded by all these other storylines that allow this system to be more real. Like I was saying in reference to the planes flying on compressed air. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm saying, okay, if it does exist, now what? What are you going to do with that? It's just another part of the storyline of lies. But if you know that the system been lying from the get-go and the system is not broken, it was built this way, then what are you really talking about? What are we really talking about here? So, once everybody is locked in to the illusions of being a superhero against a supervillain, now they just have to orchestrate the movement. Where are these superheroes going to fly? And then you have on the subconscious scale, don't think Hollywood is involved in this superhero, supervillain sort of mentality. When you have the DC and Marvel universe out there, literally bringing the Avengers and the DC superheroes together against the supervillain of the universe, Thanos, and all this other shit that's going on. You got Superman. I mean, this is not a mistake. You are the Avengers, and you're being subconsciously played by Hollywood against the supervillain Thanos, which depending on what level of consciousness you're coming from. Could be Donald Trump, could be Alex Jones, could be the reptilians, could whatever it is. It's something. It's something. My point being is that whatever something that you're comfortable with based upon your level of consciousness, that's always going to be you forever. You can go live out in the rainforest for the rest of your life and nothing will matter to you anymore. But for the people who are still addressing this system, stop wasting your time. If you're going to be about it, be about it. Talk about the roots. Don't talk about half-truths. Talk about the actual system itself. Otherwise, go live out and go be a part of the new world or the new age. Go be a part of that system or go live out in the forest. Do whatever it is you're going to do. Because this system is not letting up. There's no day off. People ask all the time, like, I don't know how you can make all these videos and some of them are like an hour and a half long, like this one. I'm not taking any days off. The villain of consciousness overall is not taking any days off. Even when I'm not working, I'm always thinking. Like I said the other day to some friends of mine, I haven't had a day off in something like 8 years. Like since I got out of the army, and it was just like, all right, well, what are you gonna do? It's been constant, day after day after day after day. And I can work. It's like going to the gym. I can work. I take, I spend one day stretching my consciousness, and other days I'll lift weights. Other days I'll do cardio or something like that. But I'll take my break. I'll sleep in here. But I've been working on this in this actually since 2008. So it's actually been 10 years. 2008 is actually when I started realizing what was going on. I didn't really activate it until about 2011. That's when I started opening the door to the spiritual warfare. That's when I can say that I actually started really engaging in something other than my own little micro bubbles. And obviously you can argue that I'm still in a micro bubble. I mean, I would agree with that just by this existence, by my little brain, my little mind, my little experience, my little body, my little this whole thing. Like, you could argue that forever. But when you're talking about like storylines that are very much engaged on an international scale, on a psychological scale, on a spiritual scale, it's very tangible. The chess game and the 3-tiered chess game, the information that's being used against the people is very tangible, and you can see it. So once you start seeing that, you either choose to do something with it or not. I've been making videos in referencing the white supremacy program and all these other programs related to the human story in and around flat earth. I've been doing that. I'm not invisible. These so-called top brass, they are aware of my perspective. They consciously stay away from it. They consciously ignore it for whatever reason. I don't know. Ultimately, I don't really care, which is why I don't really engage personally with them, because they already put me in a box. They already just say, you know what, he's off on his own little thing and it's really only about this. Okay, that's fine. Whatever you say. But just know, in the long run, you will have to address this information. And I know these people are listening to these videos. They act like you I'm not even gonna go there, man. People already know where I'm coming from. So I'm gonna close this video out and give some examples of the aftermath. Once you're in that chaos, once the system supposedly like artificially brings you out of that chaos, they're just gonna put you in another bubble of chaos. Trump represents chaos. Change after Trump is going to represent the superhero saving the day. So this is the whole next presidential thing, or going to Mars, or it's like Elon Musk. He's a superhero out there now. Alex Jones jumping on the Trump train. That was another version of superhero. Like he represents a superhero. As the majority of the people who are looking at Donald Trump as a supervillain, Donald Trump actually creates more chaos by playing the role that Donald Trump represents, a hero. So Just by him teaming up, just by Alex Jones teaming up with Donald Trump, he made a hero out of him, while the system itself makes a villain out of him. And the end game after that is chaos. So if you want to be a part of the real superhero storyline that's being projected by this synthetic program, you have to be a part of the systems that they promote. So that's this fake feminism movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, all these funded by these organizations that are trying to keep the system alive. So one main thing that's in reference to mainstream information is the guns. So the gun control stuff. So guns literally represent like a penis. If you start going into Dr. Frances Cress Welsing's work, she breaks the psychology of the gun against the genetic annihilation program and the white supremacy program. She breaks that down wonderfully. Her book, The ISIS Papers, is actually linked in a playlist on this channel if you want to go check that out. Highly recommended. Easy listen. The guy who put up that audio book he did a really good job. He's got a lot of other books on his channel too. I would highly recommend checking him out. If not, buy the book and read it yourself. But she goes into the information in reference to what guns represent in society overall. And it is directly related to, you're talking about, it's killing people. And when you're talking about that, you're going into how and why that stuff is going on. So she goes into the psychological interpretations of the genetic program. And yeah, so check that out if you're interested in that. But the new version of the whole gun control program ties directly in to the feminism movement. See, when you think about guns, you don't normally think about women and guns. You think about men with guns, war, fighting, and all that other stuff. Gun control, the NRA, it's basically the white male happy playground. It's the happy place. The NRA. That's what the gun store is. It's the happy place for the good old American boy. So what's happening now is the good old American boy is still really damn racist and broken, and something is seriously wrong with that racism storyline that hasn't changed. They tried to do the Civil Rights Act as if something changed, but nothing actually changed. So the gun control thing represents the old world. This is what it really boils down to. Anything old will be fixed by something that's new. The old world of the indigenous Americans was supposedly fixed by Christopher Columbus, bringing New World, death and destruction, and the industrial age and all that other shit over to the New World. They made you believe that story in order to make you be okay with the genocide, the massacres, and the blatant stealing of land, the inhumanity of this system overall. So, the new version of that, since all these worlds are changing and they're evolving, the mainstream version of the relationship between guns and the feminism movement is that the system is going to tell you need to give. This is just something that I'm seeing as coming down the line, how the trend looks. The system looks like it's lining up to say, if you are about that gun life, you're about that old world. And we all know why they want to take your guns away. It's because if you have guns, you're a threat to the New World control system. But on the commercial version of that storyline, they're going to promote, like on David Letterman and all these mainstream mouthpieces, they're going to tell you, if you're about that gun life and holding on to guns and all this other stuff, then you're against the feminism movement. You're for the patriarchal program. You're against the feminism movement. So how they're going to incorporate this is by appearing to fix or change the old systems. And if you don't want to be a part of this change, then you are a part of the problem. So if you don't give up your guns, then you're a part of the mainstream change program. So feminism, the fake feminism is being used as an illusion for change. And it's basically like, if you're for real feminine change, then you have to give up the real masculine guns. So this is how the whole thing is in relating to demonizing the masculine, but they're not demonizing the masculine, the organic masculine. They're demonizing the synthetic masculine. But when they demonize the synthetic masculine, they're actually inherently demonizing the organic masculine, because nobody knows what that is. People don't know about the balances of this reality. They just accept whatever the system tells them to be and how to act. So this is how these storylines are layered. This is about gun control. This is how the gun control fits in, the feminism, the LGBT, Black Lives Matter, all this stuff. It's all one storyline. Now, another part of this, to where they make you make that change, is by playing with like the food stamps. Now they're playing with your food. Once they start playing with your food and your money, now you can see it's getting real. People are really starting getting angry, irritated, scared. The fear programming's coming up. The chaos is getting more tangible, more vibrant. Once you have people in that chaos, like what 9/11 did, that was instantaneous chaos, and you went instantly into war with a country that had nothing to do with it in order to promote the agenda overall. So what's happening right now with the food stamp stuff, the gun control stuff, the Black Lives Matter stuff, where people are being shot on the street daily. Then you have the feminism movement, where women are finally coming out with, they've been coming out with it, but in public, coming out with the way the system is inherently garbage. Then you have the Black Panther movie talking about colonialism. It's creating this chaos over and over and over again. More chaos and more chaos. When you have the peak point of chaos, then you will have people doing whatever it is they need to do in order to take care of their basic human needs. So right now, the food stamps, the money, the fear is reaching a peak, and once you get the people in that peak, since you want to maintain power, that's when you institute the superhero program. So a part of the superhero program that I'm seeing is that after the fall of the dollar, like when they crashed the dollar finally, the cryptocurrency program is going to jump off. And then everybody's going to be paying with this cryptocurrency. And you're not going to be a part of the cool crowd. You're not going to be a part of the superhero crew, the Avengers, if you don't get behind this cryptocurrency stuff. And proof of this is John Oliver coming out and talking about, cryptocurrencies, is, hinting towards it. He played like he was against it, but overall he's really for cryptocurrencies when you really listen to that whole thing. But what I'm saying is that it's a channeling of people, a channeling of consciousness into a particular mindset in order to maintain control. So if you want to be a part of this real change, then you have to get behind cryptocurrency and give your guns away. If you're not behind, getting people fed because they have cryptocurrency now, and getting people safer because you want to get these guns out of the hands of people who are shooting up schools. Come on, guys. Are you really for people shooting up schools? That's this bullshit. It plays the victim out of itself in order to suck you into a deeper layer of mind control. So that's basically what I wanted to share with all of this. I had to go through I had a whole list of notes that I was getting sidetracked on here and there, but ultimately that's what it boils down to. These this system overall, this beach resort consciousness, is designed to maintain a particular style, a particular approach. And as the system becomes more, as people become more aware of this information, the system has to become more tangible so you can see it more. See, when they don't say anything, like any of these politicians, they're not saying anything about flat earth. They're not saying anything about colonialism, the real problems that are going on with white supremacy, and not talking about the infrastructure. As long as the system doesn't acknowledge anything, then they can stay the superheroes forever. This is why politicians don't really, they talk in circles. They don't actually address anything. They talk in circles. Same thing for actors in Hollywood and musicians. Hollywood speaks for the government. Hollywood speaks for the government. You get more information from Hollywood nowadays with social media and all the and late night talk shows and comedians. You get more information from them than politics. So politics itself is being, what's that word, decommissioned in a sense, and it's being shifted into this entertainment sort of. It's making everything. It's kind of like if everything was shrunk down to just the internet, like everything was shrunk down just to Facebook. Just imagine if all your politics was on Facebook, if your education was on Facebook, if your entertainment, all of it was on Facebook. And it's not a far stretch. I mean, it's actually happening. But just imagine if the government said formally, we're going to do this. The government, everything will be about Facebook. You vote on Facebook. Everything is about Facebook. Just imagine that. That's what's actually happening on a larger scale. But since you have different versions of this all over the place, you think it's something different. It's not. It's the same thing. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying is what's going down with these mind control programs. And some people might think I'm coming down hard on these so-called flat earthers or other truthers and all this. I'm actually being soft. I'm being real nice in order to be received in any kind of way. I mean, I could really go in hard on how pissed off I am about some of these people in not only the so-called flat earth community, but truther communities, conspiracy. It's just like Alex Jones. It's ridiculous. You're actually more a part of the problem than any kind of solution. You are a gatekeeper. You're a gatekeeper if you're telling people to not talk about certain information because it threatens your little bubble. Get the hell out of that beach resort consciousness and start figuring out what's going on in the ocean of the infrastructure of this system. Because every time you pride yourself in that bullshit, more and more people are being lined up. Just because it's not happening at your doorstep doesn't mean it's not happening. Because it is happening at people's doorstep. Not only, you don't have to go to so-called third world countries. Go down the street. Walk around Oakland. Walk around Detroit. Walk around Flint, Michigan. Walk around. You'll see it. But people are in their own little micro bubbles, and they will pride themselves in their little micro storylines and won't do anything other than that and think they're a superhero. Keep thinking you're a superhero until they take your cape, your little flat earth cape, and start flying around the earth talking about this is the new world. Now what'd you do? Exactly what they wanted you to do. You did the work for them. And you kept doing it because you were too prideful to realize that you were just making another beach resort. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for the support. I really do appreciate it. Please, if you feel the need, like, share, subscribe, leave some comments. There's a lot of good little dialogue back and forth between people in the comment sections. That's actually really good. Really good for people who are kind of, it balances out the video a lot. Like sometimes I'll leave a comment here and there to balance out what's going on in the video and what's going on in the comment section, and it also helps with the visuals, like people actually being able to see this video in different kinds of like lists, recommendations lists, and so on and so forth. So thank you again. I really do appreciate it. One thing I did forget, cannabis is going to be a part of this too. The whole superhero stuff. One thing I did forget to mention was cannabis, legalization, and the cool crew. And think of it, like the next presidential election is going to be in 2020. You don't think they're going to play some 420, 2020 sort of game and play this, oh, like, let's just legalize it across the board. That's just going to make another cool crew, another cool crowd. It's another desensitization, aspect that's there. And right now it's just gearing up. So anything that's in and around like the legalization of cannabis and so on and so forth, like I was saying, the gun control, the feminism movement, the Black Lives Matter, the Black Renaissance in Hollywood, the bringing down of Donald Trump in 2020 or before then, and the bringing about the information about the Pizzagate and the human trafficking and pedophilia. I'm not saying like none of this stuff is supposed to be. Of course, it's supposed to be brought to the surface. My main point is that the system itself is going to bring it to the surface. They're going to bring the darkest of the dark and the lightest of the light to the surface to maintain that chaos in a higher state of consciousness. So you're locked into the lower states of the emotional body by realizing all of this pedophilia and all this other stuff that's happening in these systems, that allowed to happen in these systems, and also be desensitized by the so-called legalization, the doggy treat of cannabis, the doggy treat of cryptocurrency or whatever else they're going to do after the dollar crashes in order to keep people in line. So just look out for that. I've mentioned that a few times in other videos. So until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.